The bullet struck the saloon door just as Willa Zimmerman stepped through it, and she did not even flinch. Xavier Quinlan watched from his corner table, whiskey glass halfway to his lips, as the woman with the empty eyes walked straight through the chaos of gunfire like she was already dead inside. Men were diving behind tables, women screaming, but she just moved through the smoke and noise with the mechanical precision of someone who had stopped caring whether she lived or died a long time ago. It was April 1876 in Ogden, Utah, and the railroad had brought every kind of desperate soul to this junction town, where the tracks stretched east and west like iron promises. Xavier had been riding through when he decided to stay a while, drawn by work as a ranch hand at the Peterson spread just outside town. He was 26 years old, sun-weathered and strong, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes that still held some measure of hope, despite 3 years of drifting after the war that had taken his family's Tennessee farm. The gunfight ended as quickly as it started. Some dispute over cards that left one man bleeding on the sawdust floor and another running for his horse. Willa Zimmerman stepped over the wounded man without looking down and took her usual seat at the bar. Xavier had seen her around town for the 2 weeks he had been here, always alone, always with that same hollow expression that made her look older than her 23 years. She worked as a laundress, he had learned, scrubbing clothes in scalding water from dawn until her hands were raw. Before that, rumor said she had been married to a prospector who beat her, then abandoned her when the silver claims went dry. Before that, other rumors spoke of a childhood in a mining camp where her parents died of fever, leaving her to fend for herself at 14. Xavier did not normally make it his business to pry into the sorrows of strangers, but something about those empty eyes haunted him. Maybe it was because he recognized something of himself in that blankness, the way grief could hollow you out until you were just going through the motions. Or maybe it was because beneath the exhaustion and defeat, he could see traces of who she might have been once, before life had beaten the light out of her. She had dark blonde hair that she kept tied back in a severe knot, and fine features that spoke of delicate beauty buried under years of hard labor. Her hands were cracked and reddened, her clothes mended so many times the original fabric was hard to discern, and she carried herself with the careful stillness of someone who had learned not to draw attention. He found himself standing and walking to the bar before he had fully decided to do it. She was staring at the glass of cheap whiskey the bartender had poured her, watching it like it might hold answers. Xavier took the stool beside her, very aware that she had not acknowledged his presence even slightly. "Evening," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Name is Xavier Quinlan." "I have seen you around town." She did not look at him. "I know who you are. Everyone knows everyone in a place this size." Her voice was flat, devoid of curiosity or interest. "I was wondering if you might let me buy you dinner sometime." The words came out more directly than he had intended, but something told him that anything subtle would slide right off her without making an impression. Now she did turn to look at him, and up close, those empty eyes were even more unsettling. They were blue-gray like winter sky, and they studied him with the cold assessment of someone who had learned to expect the worst from people. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I think you could use a decent meal and some company that does not want anything from you." A bitter smile touched her lips, the first expression he had seen on her face. "Men always want something. I want to have dinner with you. That is all I am asking for right now." She turned back to her whiskey, drank it in one swift motion, and stood. "I finish work at 6 tomorrow. There is a boarding house on 5th Street that serves supper. If you are there, I will eat with you. If you are not, I will not think about it again." Then she walked out, leaving Xavier with the distinct impression that she truly would not care either way. But he was there the next evening, hat in hand, standing outside the boarding house when she came walking up the street. Her hair was still damp from the laundry steam, and she looked exhausted in a way that went bone deep. She stopped when she saw him, something flickering across her face too quickly to name, then nodded once and went inside. The boarding house served simple fare, beef stew and bread, but it was hot and filling. They sat across from each other at a long table with other boarders, which seemed to ease some of Willa's wariness. Xavier talked about inconsequential things, the ranch where he worked, the string of horses they were breaking, the way the mountains looked at sunset. He did not ask her questions, did not pry. He just filled the silence with easy conversation that required nothing from her. She ate steadily, methodically, like someone who never quite knew when the next meal might come. Halfway through, she surprised him by speaking. "You are from Tennessee." "How did you know? Your accent, faint, but it is there." She tore off a piece of bread. "My mother was from Tennessee, Nashville. She used to tell me about magnolia trees and summer nights so hot the air felt like syrup." "I remember those nights," Xavier said softly, "before the war." Willa nodded and silence fell again, but it felt less hostile now. When they finished eating, Xavier walked her to the small room she rented above a dry goods store. At the door, she turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being kind. You do not know me." "I have nothing to offer you." Xavier met those empty eyes steadily. "Maybe I do not need you to offer me anything. Maybe I just want to know you." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her trying to decide whether to believe him or dismiss him as a fool. Finally, she said, "Same time tomorrow if you want," he smiled. "I want." And so it became a pattern. Every evening after work they would meet and share a meal. Slowly, in increments so small they were almost imperceptible, Willa began to thaw. She started asking him questions, tentative at first, about his life before Ogden. He told her about growing up on a farm with 3 sisters, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about coming home from the war to find everything burned and his family scattered. He spoke of the years of drifting that followed, looking for something he could not quite name. In return, she began to share fragments of her own story. Her parents had come west chasing silver dreams when she was just a child. They had died within months of each other when she was 14, leaving her alone in a brutal mining camp where women were scarce and protection scarcer. She had married the first man who offered, a prospector named Dutch Carmichael, because it seemed like the only way to survive. He had been mean when he drank, which was often, and meaner when he lost money, which was always. After 2 years of black eyes and broken promises, he had left her in Ogden with nothing but the clothes on her back and debts she had spent the last 3 years working off. "I paid the last of it 2 months ago," she told Xavier one evening in May as they sat on the steps outside her room, watching the sun set over the Wasatch Mountains. "I am finally free of him, of what he owed, but I do not feel free. I just feel empty." Xavier wanted to reach for her hand, but sensed she was not ready for that. Empty is not the same as dead. Empty means there is room to fill back up. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the first crack in that defensive wall she kept around herself. "You actually believe that, do not you? You actually think people can start over?" "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what is the point of any of this?" Willa was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, "I used to believe in things too. Love, family, a home of my own. Every single one of those beliefs got beaten out of me." "Then maybe it is time to learn to believe again," Xavier said. "Not in the same way, but in new things, better things." She did not respond, but she also did not get up and leave. They sat there as the stars came out, not touching, barely speaking, but sharing the silence in a way that felt like the beginning of something. As spring turned to summer, Xavier found himself thinking about Willa constantly. The way she had started to smile occasionally, small, careful smiles that appeared and vanished like sunlight through clouds. The way she had begun to lean toward him slightly when they walked, as if unconsciously seeking his warmth. He brought her small gifts, nothing that would offend her pride but tokens that said he was thinking of her. A ribbon for her hair that matched her eyes, a jar of honey from a local farm, a book of poetry he found in a traveling merchant's wagon, because she had mentioned once that her mother used to read poems to her. She accepted each gift with a mixture of suspicion and wonder, like she could not quite believe they came without strings attached. But slowly, so slowly, she began to trust him. She started to talk about things beyond just survival, mentioning in passing that she had always wanted to learn to ride a horse properly, that she had once dreamed of having a garden with roses and vegetables, that she wondered what the ocean looked like. "I could teach you to ride," Xavier offered one evening in late June. They were walking along the river that ran through town, the air finally cooling after a scorching day. "I work with horses every day. It would not be difficult." Willa looked uncertain. "I do not have time for such things." "I have work. Take a Sunday. Everyone deserves one day to do something just for themselves." She considered this, and he could see the internal battle playing out across her face, duty and desire wrestling for dominance. Finally, she nodded. "One Sunday. But if I fall off and break my neck, I am going to be very angry with you." The joke surprised a laugh out of Xavier, and he saw answering humor flicker in her eyes, there and gone. Progress. That Sunday, he borrowed a gentle mare from the ranch and met Willa at the edge of town. She showed up in her usual worn dress, and he realized with a pang that she probably did not own anything suitable for riding. He had brought an extra pair of his younger sister's old trousers and a shirt, saved from before the farm burned, and he offered them shyly. "I thought these might be more practical than a dress," he said, and was rewarded with another of those rare smiles. She changed behind some bushes and emerged looking self-conscious but more comfortable. The clothes were a bit big on her thin frame, but they would do. Xavier helped her mount, his hands on her waist, and felt her tense at the contact before deliberately relaxing. He swung up onto his own horse, and they started out at a walk, heading toward the foothills where the grass grew tall and golden. At first, Willa was rigid with tension, gripping the saddle horn like her life depended on it. But Xavier kept up a steady stream of gentle instruction, and gradually she began to ease into the rhythm of the horse's gait. They walked for an hour, then he showed her how to use her legs to ask for a trot. She bounced awkwardly at first and let out a startled laugh that was the most genuine sound he had ever heard from her. "This is harder than it looks," she said breathlessly, but she was grinning now, really grinning, and Xavier felt his heart turn over in his chest. "You are doing beautifully," he said, and meant it in more ways than one. They spent the whole day out there, riding and resting and talking. Willa asked him to tell her about his sisters, and he painted pictures with words of Clara who had been wild and fearless, of Margaret who had loved books more than people, of little Sarah who had followed him everywhere. He could talk about them now without the grief choking him, could remember the good times instead of just the loss. In return, Willa told him about her mother, who had been educated and refined before circumstances dragged her west. "She taught me to read and write, to do sums, to speak properly. She wanted me to have chances she never got. I think it broke her heart when she realized I was going to end up just like her, trapped by circumstances and bad luck." "You are not trapped," Xavier said firmly. "You are free now. You can do anything you want." Willa looked at him with those eyes that were perhaps the tiniest bit less empty than they had been. "I am starting to think you might be right. I am starting to think maybe I could have a different life. But it is terrifying, Xavier, hoping for things again. What if it all falls apart?" "What if it does not?" he countered. "What if you let yourself hope and things actually work out?" She did not answer, but she reached out and touched his hand where it rested on his saddle, just a brief press of her fingers before pulling away. It was the first time she had initiated contact, and Xavier treasured it like gold. As summer deepened, their relationship deepened with it. Xavier was courting her, he knew, though he never used that word. He was wooing her back to life, trying to show her through daily kindness and constant presence that not all men were cruel, that she deserved gentleness and care. He walked her home every evening, stayed to talk until the stars were bright overhead. He brought her lunch when he could get away from the ranch, finding her at the laundry with her arms deep in scalding water and her face flushed from the heat. And slowly, miraculously, he began to see changes in her. She smiled more often, and those smiles reached her eyes. She laughed at his jokes, teased him gently when he said something foolish. Her posture became less defensive, her movements less careful. She started wearing the ribbon he had given her, a small vanity that delighted him because it meant she was beginning to care about something beyond mere survival. In late July, the ranch owner threw a barn dance to celebrate a successful horse sale. Xavier asked Willa to accompany him, expecting her to refuse. She had never shown any interest in social gatherings, seemed to prefer their quiet dinners and walks, but she surprised him by saying yes. "I do not have anything appropriate to wear," she warned him. "You could wear a flour sack and still be the prettiest woman there," he said honestly, and watched color rise in her cheeks. She showed up in the same mended dress she always wore, but she had washed her hair until it shone and wore it down for the first time, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. Xavier caught his breath when he saw her. Without the severe knot pulling her features tight, she looked younger, softer, breathtakingly lovely. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. She took it, then said with unusual shyness, "You look very handsome yourself." The dance was held in the big barn on the Peterson ranch, lit by lanterns and filled with music from a fiddle and guitar. Xavier led Willa inside, very aware of the curious looks they were drawing. In a small town like Ogden, everyone knew everyone's business, and the sight of the withdrawn laundress with the drifter cowboy was enough to set tongues wagging. But Xavier did not care about gossip, and he was pleased to see that Willa seemed to be ignoring it too. When he asked her to dance, she hesitated only a moment before nodding. He took her hand, placed his other hand carefully on her waist, and they began to move to the music. She was stiff at first, uncomfortable with the closeness and the attention. But Xavier kept his movements simple and his hold gentle, and gradually she relaxed into it. They danced 3 songs in a row, and by the third one, Willa was actually enjoying herself, her eyes bright and her cheeks flushed with pleasure rather than embarrassment. "Thank you," she said softly as the music ended. "I cannot remember the last time I had fun." "Then we will have to make sure you have fun more often," Xavier said, and was rewarded with a smile that made his breath catch. They stepped outside for air, walking away from the barn toward the corrals where horses dozed in the summer night. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver light. They leaned against the fence, shoulders almost touching, and watched the peaceful scene. "I need to tell you something," Willa said abruptly. "I need you to understand what you are getting into with me." Xavier turned to face her, suddenly worried. "What do you mean?" She kept her eyes on the horses, her voice low and steady. "Dutch, my husband, he did not just beat me." He killed something inside me. For a long time, I did not think I could ever feel anything again. I did not want to feel anything, because feeling meant hurting. When you started paying attention to me, I thought you were just another man who wanted something from me that I did not have to give. But you kept showing up, kept being kind, and I started to realize you were different. These past few months, I have felt myself coming back to life, like frozen ground thawing in spring. And it scares me, Xavier. It scares me because caring about someone means you can be hurt again. Xavier reached out and gently turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. I know you are scared. I am scared too. But Willa, these months with you have meant everything to me. I am falling in love with you. I might already be there if I am being honest. And I know you are not ready to say something like that back, might never be ready, and that is all right. I am not going anywhere. I will wait as long as it takes for you to trust me, to trust this. Her eyes, those eyes that had been so empty when he first saw her, were full now, brimming with tears that she was trying to blink back. What if I cannot love you the way you deserve? What if he broke that part of me permanently? You are already loving me, Xavier said softly. Every time you show up for dinner, every time you let me make you laugh, every time you share a piece of your past with me, you are loving me. It might not look like what you expected love to look like, but it is still love. And I will take whatever you can give me, for as long as you will let me. The tears spilled over then, tracking down her cheeks in the moonlight. Xavier caught them with his thumbs, cradling her face in his hands. You are so much stronger than you know. You survived things that would have destroyed most people. You are still here, still fighting. That is not broken, Willa. That is courage. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I do not feel very courageous. Then let me be brave enough for both of us right now. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her forehead, then each damp cheek, and finally, softly, her lips. She stiffened for just a moment, old reflexes and old fears surfacing. Then she melted into him, kissing him back with a tentative sweetness that made his heart soar. It was not a passionate kiss, not yet, but it was real and honest and full of possibility. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was precious and fragile and strong all at once. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered into his shirt. I did not think I could, but I am. And you are right. It is terrifying. We will be terrified together, he promised, and felt her arms tighten around his waist. They stood there for a long time, holding each other under the stars, and Xavier felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had been drifting for 3 years, looking for something to anchor him, and he had found it in the most unexpected place, in a broken woman who was learning to be whole again. As August arrived with its dry heat, Xavier and Willa began to talk about the future in concrete terms. He had saved most of his wages from the ranch, and combined with what she had managed to put aside after paying off Dutch's debts, they had enough for a start. Xavier approached the ranch owner, Mr. Peterson, about the possibility of buying a small parcel of land on the edge of the property. I want to build something permanent, he told the older man. I want to have a home, a family. I am asking Willa Zimmerman to marry me if she will have me. Peterson, a gruff but fair man, studied Xavier with sharp eyes. That girl has had a rough go of it. You planning to treat her right? Better than right. I am planning to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows she is loved and valued. Peterson nodded slowly. There is a piece of land by the creek, about 40 acres. Good grazing, water access. I have been thinking about selling it off. I will give you a fair price and let you pay it off over time if you are willing to keep working for me while you build. Xavier could have kissed the man. That is more than fair. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Building a life from scratch is hard work. But if anyone can do it, I reckon you can. You have got grit, Quinlan." Now Xavier just had to convince Willa to take the leap with him. He knew she cared for him, knew she loved him even if she still sometimes seemed surprised by that fact. But marriage was a big step for someone who still carried the scars of her first attempt. He planned carefully, waiting for the right moment. It came on a Sunday in mid-August when they rode out to the parcel of land he hoped would be theirs. He had not told her about the conversation with Peterson, had just suggested they explore a bit beyond where they usually went. When they reached the spot, Xavier dismounted and helped Willa down. The creek bubbled cheerfully over smooth stones, and cottonwood trees provided shade. The grass was green despite the summer heat, and the mountains rose majestically in the distance. It was beautiful and peaceful, full of promise. "What do you think?" Xavier asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "It is lovely," Willa said, walking to the creek and dipping her fingers in the cool water. "Why did you bring me here?" Xavier came to stand beside her. "Because I want to build a house right there on that rise where you can see the mountains. I want to run some cattle, maybe horses. I want to plant that garden you talked about with roses and vegetables. And I want to do all of it with you if you will have me." Willa went very still, her fingers trailing in the water. "Xavier, I am asking you to marry me," he said, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I know you are scared, and I know marriage means something different to you than it might to other women. But I love you, Willa. I love your strength and your courage. I love the way you are learning to laugh again. I love watching you come back to life. I want to spend the rest of my days making sure those eyes of yours never go empty again." She turned to look at him, and he saw a storm of emotions playing across her face. Fear, yes, but also hope and longing and love. "I swore I would never marry again. I swore no man would ever have that kind of power over me." "I do not want power over you," Xavier said. "I want to be your partner, your equal. I want us to build something together, something that belongs to both of us. And if you do not want a legal marriage, if that carries too many bad memories, then we will not do it that way. We will make our own promises to each other, whatever feels right to you." Tears were sliding down her cheeks again, but she was smiling through them. "You would do that? You would give up a legal marriage just to be with me?" "I would give up anything to be with you. The papers do not matter. What matters is the commitment we make to each other." Willa reached up and cupped his face in her hands, those work-roughened hands that told the story of her survival. "I want the legal marriage. I want the papers and the ceremony and all of it, because this time it will mean something completely different. This time I am choosing it freely with a man who has proven he deserves my trust. Yes, Xavier. Yes, I will marry you." He let out a whoop of joy that startled birds from the nearby trees and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing breathlessly. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, deeply, and she kissed him back with a passion that made his knees weak. They were both grinning like fools when they finally broke apart. "When?" she asked. "When do you want to get married?" "Tomorrow, if we could. But I suppose we should do it properly. Give people a chance to celebrate with us." Willa wrinkled her nose. "I do not need a big celebration. I just need you. But I suppose we should at least tell Mr. Peterson and a few others." They decided on the first Saturday in September, giving them a few weeks to prepare. Word spread quickly in Ogden, and the reaction was almost universally positive. People had seen Xavier's patient courtship of the standoffish laundress, had noticed the way she had slowly blossomed under his care. Women who had always kept their distance from Willa, perhaps unsure how to approach someone so closed off, suddenly appeared with offers of help. A dress was provided, simple but pretty, made of soft blue fabric that matched her eyes. The pastor's wife contributed a veil. The owner of the boarding house offered to host a small reception. Willa accepted all of this with bemusement, unused to being the center of positive attention. But Xavier could see it meant something to her, this evidence that the community saw her as more than just the broken woman who scrubbed their clothes. She was becoming part of the town's fabric, a member of a community rather than an outsider just surviving on its margins. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Xavier dressed carefully in the new suit he had purchased for the occasion, his hands shaking slightly as he tied his string tie. He had not been this nervous facing down angry bulls or breaking wild horses. But this mattered in a way nothing else ever had. This was Willa, trusting him with her heart and her future. When he saw her walking toward him in the small church, he forgot how to breathe. The dress transformed her, or perhaps it was simply that she was so happy that she glowed from within. Her hair was down, crowned with simple flowers, and her eyes were shining with tears and joy. Those empty eyes that had haunted him were full to overflowing now, full of love and hope and the promise of a future neither of them had dared to dream of just months ago. They stood before the pastor and exchanged vows, and Xavier's voice was steady and sure. "I promise to honor you, to cherish you, to be your shelter in every storm. I promise to love you every day, to remind you of your worth, to make you laugh even when you do not feel like smiling. I promise to build a life with you that is full of joy and peace and all the things you deserve." Willa's voice trembled but did not break. "I promise to trust you, to lean on you when I need to, and to stand strong beside you when you need me. I promise to love you with everything I have, even the parts of me that are still healing. I promise to build a home with you filled with laughter and love and hope. You brought me back to life, Xavier, and I promise to spend the rest of my life being grateful for that gift." When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed his bride with a tenderness that made several women in attendance dab at their eyes. The small congregation cheered, and they walked back down the aisle hand in hand, grinning at each other like they had won the greatest prize in the world. The reception was simple but joyful. Food and music and congratulations from people who genuinely seemed happy for them. Xavier danced with his wife, holding her close and marveling at the fact that she was his now, that they belonged to each other. "Are you happy?" he asked her as they swayed to the music. "I did not think I could ever be this happy again," she admitted. "I thought that part of me was dead. But you brought it back, Xavier. You made it your purpose to see me shine, and somehow you did it. I am so grateful I walked through that saloon door the day you saw me." "I am grateful I had the courage to speak to you," he said. "Best decision I ever made." They spent their wedding night in the hotel, the finest room Ogden had to offer, which was not particularly grand but felt luxurious to both of them. Xavier was gentle and patient, very aware that Willa's previous experiences of marriage had included violation and pain. But she came to him willingly, with trust and desire, and they learned each other slowly, tenderly, building something beautiful out of the ashes of what had been. Afterward, she lay in his arms, tracing patterns on his chest. "Thank you for waiting for me," she whispered. "Thank you for being patient enough to let me find my way back to this. You are worth waiting for," he said simply. "You are worth everything." The next morning, they rode out to their land and began making plans in earnest. Xavier would continue working for Peterson while they built their house, and Willa would finally give up the laundry work that had defined her life for so long. She was nervous about not bringing in money, but Xavier insisted. "We have enough with my wages. And once we get the house built and some livestock established, there will be plenty of work for both of us. But right now, I want you to rest. I want you to heal. Those hands of yours have worked hard enough." She looked at her scarred, reddened hands and then back at him. I do not know how to not work. Then learn to work for yourself instead of for survival. Learn to enjoy things. We will build the garden you wanted. You can learn to ride better. You can read all those books I have been collecting for you. Let yourself live, Willa. It took her a while to adjust to that idea, but gradually she began to embrace it. While Xavier worked, she explored their land, planned the garden, helped as much as he would let her with the house construction. Several men from the ranch came to help on Sundays, and the house began to take shape. It was not large or fancy, but it was solid and well built, with windows that looked toward the mountains and a wide porch where they could sit on summer evenings. By late October, the house was ready enough to move into. They brought their few possessions from town, and Willa stood in the middle of their front room, turning slowly to take it all in. "Our home," she said wonderingly. "I never thought I would have a real home again." "Our home," Xavier confirmed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "First of many good things to come." That winter was hard, as winters in Utah tended to be, but they weathered it together. They learned each other's rhythms, how to share space and work and dreams. Xavier taught Willa more about horses and cattle. She taught him to appreciate poetry and read to him on long winter evenings. They made love often, and with increasing passion as Willa's trust deepened and her old fears faded. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, building intimacy through shared confidences and comfortable silences. In March, Willa woke up feeling ill and realized with a mixture of joy and terror that she was pregnant. She waited a week to be sure before telling Xavier, afraid of how he might react. But when she finally told him, he picked her up and spun her around just like he had when she agreed to marry him, whooping with delight. "We are going to have a baby. Willa, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, still uncertain. "I know we have not talked about children much." "Happy, I am thrilled. Are you happy? Are you scared?" "Both," she admitted. "Very both, but mostly happy, I think. If the baby is anything like you, how could I not be happy?" Xavier kissed her soundly. "This baby will be the luckiest child in the world because they will have you for a mother." Willa's eyes filled with tears, the good kind. "I am going to try so hard to be a good mother, to give them everything I did not have." "You are going to be an amazing mother," Xavier said firmly. "You are kind and strong, and you know what it is to survive hard things. You will teach our children to be tough and tender, just like you." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick for months, and there were times when Xavier worried about her health. But she was determined and resilient, and slowly she began to bloom with the pregnancy. By summer, she had a round belly that Xavier loved to rest his hands on, feeling the baby kick and move. "Strong little one," he would murmur, "just like your mama." They prepared the small second bedroom as a nursery, building a cradle from wood Xavier carefully selected and sanded until it was smooth as silk. Willa sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her face soft with anticipation. She was still scared, Xavier knew, but she was also glowing with happiness in a way that made his heart full. In early November, as the first snows were beginning to dust the mountains, Willa went into labor. Xavier rode like the devil was chasing him to fetch the midwife, then spent the longest hours of his life pacing outside the bedroom while Willa labored. He could hear her cries of pain and felt helpless, wishing he could take it from her, bear it himself. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard a new sound, the thin wail of a newborn. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Quinlan, and your wife did beautifully. She is tired but well." Xavier rushed in to find Willa propped against the pillows, exhausted and sweaty and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and squalling. Xavier approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at his son. "He is perfect," he breathed. Willa, he is perfect. We made him, she said wonderingly, looking between the baby and Xavier. We made this beautiful little person. Xavier sat on the edge of the bed and put his arm around his wife, looking down at their son. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on anything. Now, looking at the baby, Willa said, "What about William?" "My father's name was William, and we could call him Will." "William Quinlan," Xavier said, testing it out. "I like it, Will for short. Welcome to the world, Will." The baby stopped crying and seemed to look at them with unfocused eyes, and Xavier felt something shift in his chest, a fierce protectiveness and love that was almost overwhelming. This was his family. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting. Not just a place, but these people, this purpose. Parenthood was exhausting and wonderful. Will was a good baby, but he still needed constant care, and both Xavier and Willa were run ragged in those early months. But they learned together, figuring out the rhythms of feeding and sleeping and soothing. Xavier loved watching Willa with their son, seeing the fierce love in her eyes, the gentleness in her scarred hands as she cradled him. "I was so afraid I would not know how to do this," she confessed one night as they lay in bed with Will sleeping in his cradle nearby. "I was afraid I was too broken." "You were never broken," Xavier said. "Wounded, yes, but not broken, and look at you now. You are the best mother Will could have asked for." As Will grew from a newborn to an infant and then to a toddler, the family grew too. Xavier expanded their small herd of cattle with calves from Peterson's stock, and they began to establish themselves as a working ranch. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way nothing else had ever been. They were building something that would last, something they could pass on to their children. When Will was 2, Willa became pregnant again. This time she was less scared and more confident, knowing what to expect. Their daughter was born on a warm spring evening in 1880, arriving quickly and with less drama than her brother. They named her Rose, for the roses Willa had finally managed to coax into blooming in her garden. With 2 children running around, the house felt full of life and noise and joy. Xavier would sometimes stop in the middle of a task and just watch his family, marveling at how far they had come. Willa laughing as she chased a toddler and held a baby, her eyes bright and full, so different from the empty-eyed woman he had seen in the saloon 4 years ago. Those eyes shone now, with happiness and purpose and love. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they lay in bed after the children were finally asleep, and Xavier pulled Willa close. "Do you remember when I first spoke to you? I thought you were crazy or wanted something horrible from me," she said with a laugh. "I could not imagine why anyone would want to buy me dinner. I saw those empty eyes and I knew I had to try to bring light back into them. It became my purpose, making you shine again." Willa propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with those eyes that now sparkled with mischief and warmth and contentment. "You did more than make me shine, Xavier. You brought me back from the dead. I was just going through the motions, waiting to die, and you gave me reasons to live. You gave me love and a home and a family and hope. You gave me myself back. We gave each other back," Xavier said softly. "I was drifting before I found you. I had lost my family, my home, my purpose. And then I walked into that saloon and saw you, and suddenly I knew why I had been wandering. I was looking for you. I was looking for this life we would build together." She leaned down and kissed him, slow and sweet. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You are my everything, Xavier Quinlan. And you are mine, Willa Quinlan, now and always." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the ease of long familiarity and the passion of deep love. Afterward, Willa fell asleep in his arms, and Xavier lay awake for a while, listening to her breathe, listening to their children making small sleeping sounds in the next room. He thought about the man he had been when he rode into Ogden all those years ago, restless and searching. He thought about the woman Willa had been, hollow and hopeless. And he thought about who they were now, partners and lovers and parents, people who had taken their broken pieces and built something whole and beautiful. The years continued to unfold. Will grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved horses as much as his father. Rose was wild and joyful, always laughing, always running. 2 more children followed, another son named Thomas and a daughter named Grace. The ranch prospered, growing from a small operation to a respectable spread that provided well for the family. Willa's garden became legendary in the area, full of roses and vegetables and herbs that she used for cooking and medicine. She taught her daughters to nurture growing things, to find strength in gentleness. Xavier taught his sons to be kind and just, to respect women, to work hard but not let work define them. They built a life that was full of love and laughter and hard work and simple pleasures. On summer evenings, they would all sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, Xavier and Willa side by side, children tumbling around their feet. These were the moments Xavier treasured most, the ordinary moments that made up a life, that turned a house into a home and people into a family. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on that same porch after putting the children to bed, and Xavier wrapped his arms around his wife from behind. She leaned into him, comfortable and content. "You remember what you said that first night I asked you to dinner," Xavier murmured. "You said men always want something. I remember, and I was wrong. You wanted to give me something, not take. You wanted to give me back myself." Xavier turned her to face him, looking into those eyes that he had fallen in love with precisely because he could see the light waiting to shine through the darkness. Those eyes that had been so empty were now bright with happiness, with the accumulated joy of 10 years of love and partnership. "Your eyes shine so beautifully," he said softly. "It was my purpose to make that happen, and I will keep making it happen for the rest of my life." Willa smiled, that radiant smile that still made his heart skip. "And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you saw something worth saving in me, that you loved me when I could not love myself, that you were patient enough to wait for me to come back to life." "I would wait forever for you," Xavier said. "You do not have to wait any more," Willa said. "I am here. I am whole. And I am yours as you are mine until the end of our days." They kissed as the stars came out, 2 people who had been broken and lost finding completeness in each other. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with quiet life, their children sleeping safe and warm, their cattle grazing peacefully, their land stretching out toward the mountains in the distance. Xavier had made it his purpose to see Willa's eyes shine, and he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. But the truth was, she had saved him just as much as he had saved her. They had found each other at exactly the right moment, 2 lost souls recognizing something vital in each other, and they had built something extraordinary from the ruins of their pasts. Their story was not one of perfect people or perfect circumstances. It was a story of healing and hope, of choosing to trust and love even when it seemed impossible. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and harder times, but also of the enduring human capacity for resilience and redemption. And it was a love story, through and through. A love that started with compassion and grew into passion. A love that weathered storms and celebrated sunshine. A love that built homes and raised children and turned empty eyes full of light. It was the kind of love that lasts forever, that echoes through generations, that proves even in the hardest times and harshest places, 2 people can find each other and create something beautiful. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask how they fell in love, Xavier would always tell them about seeing Willa walk through gunfire without flinching, about empty eyes that called to something in his soul. And Willa would smile and add that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, that love can grow even in the rocky soil of heartbreak and loss. Their grandchildren would see the way their grandparents still held hands, still smiled at each other across the dinner table, still danced together on the porch when they thought no one was watching. They would grow up surrounded by the evidence that true love exists, that it is worth fighting for, worth believing in, even when everything seems dark. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the family, a testament to what Xavier and Willa built together. The original house was expanded and renovated over the years, but that front porch remained, the place where so many important conversations happened, where so many memories were made. And every evening, for as long as they lived, Xavier and Willa would stand on that porch and watch the sun set together. He would wrap his arms around her and she would lean into him, and they would marvel at the life they had created, at the journey from despair to joy, from emptiness to fullness, from broken to whole. "I love you," he would say, the same words he had said thousands of times before. "I love you too," she would answer, the same response she had given thousands of times before. But the words never grew stale or routine because they meant them with their whole hearts every single time. This was their happy ending, earned through patience and perseverance, built on a foundation of mutual respect and unwavering devotion. This was what happened when a cowboy made it his purpose to bring light back into empty eyes, and when a broken woman found the courage to hope again. They had created something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love that would ripple through generations. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the stars blazed overhead, you could feel it in the very air around their ranch. This was a place built on love, a place where miracles happened, where empty eyes learned to shine again. Xavier and Willa Quinlan lived long, full lives surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. They worked their land until they were old, always side by side, always partners in every sense of the word. And when they finally passed, within months of each other, as often happens with couples who are deeply bonded, they left behind a family that understood what real love looked like, what commitment meant, what it took to build something lasting. Their story became the foundation myth of the family, told and retold, embellished and cherished. But the heart of it always remained the same. A cowboy saw a woman with empty eyes and made it his purpose to see them shine, and in doing so, he found his own redemption. A woman who thought she was broken beyond repair learned to trust and love again, and discovered she had always been stronger than she knew. It was a love story set against the harsh beauty of the Wild West, a testament to the power of compassion and patience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope and healing are possible. It was their story, uniquely theirs, but also universal in its message that love can conquer even the deepest wounds, that two people can find each other across the wasteland of their pasts and build something beautiful together. And that is how it ended, not with drama or tragedy, but with peace and contentment and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived together. Xavier kept his promise to always make Willa's eyes shine, and she kept her promise to love him with everything she had. They built their home, raised their family, and created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was exactly the ending they both deserved, the happy conclusion to a story that started with emptiness and ended with fullness, that began with two broken people and ended with one strong family, that proved beyond any doubt that love truly can heal all wounds and make all things new.